Hi everyone, welcome back in another video where we're going to be creating this awesome model sheet as you can see. And two things that we are going to work on beside working on the design, because that's the simplest part. We are going to work on this. When I click outside of the model sheet, it closes down automatically. And also we're going to be working on the swiping down effect as you can see. So when I hit a certain threshold, it is closed down automatically. So if you want to learn how to create this, stick with me till the end of this video. Welcome back. Here we are in our Visual Studio Code, and I'm opening the model sheet.js with which I just created it. And as you can see, we are returning empty divs, and we have also the model sheet.css for the styling, all of them inside the model sheet folder. And also make sure to call or to import the model sheet component inside the app.js component. So the steps that we are going to follow in order to create this model sheet. So the first step, I'm going to create the actual container. And the second step, I'm going to create the content inside of it. Then we are going to create the logic to be able to handle the swipe up and down, and also the opening and the closing of the actual model sheet. And in each step, I'm going to explain what I did in order to save a little bit of time and to make the video a little bit shorter. So this is our empty model sheet as you can see here, and this is our body that I just created it. And as you can see, we have those lines. So the model sheet root is the root element, and inside of it, we have the model sheet container that contains the div, which is the line, which is this, and the model sheet content, where we're going to be adding all the elements to fill up the model sheet.js. And also one thing that I want to show you here, so I'm going to put this off. I'm going to save the file to load, to re-render the component. And we have this button because we need to have an opener, something that's going to trigger the model sheet. So I added it here. So I'm going to put this off. So I'm going to put this back, sorry, here. And I'm going to explain things here, the styling of it. So I'm going to go rapidly to explaining those things because they are pretty much obvious. So the width, I use the percentage here, the 75 percentage, so I can, when I open the window full screen, the width of the model sheet follows. The height 400 pixel, the white, the color or the background color is white, the box shadow here is. So those are very, very easy properties to set. And I want to talk a little bit about the fixed position. We did the fixed position and we didn't use the absolute because in my experience, and this is something that I saw, uh, using the fixed position, it's going to help us to put the container always at the top of all the elements of your website or your app. But also when you have a website that is a little bit long or an app, when you're scrolling down, this container is going to be fixed like this. And that's something that we want, especially in apps where we're using the model sheet. So the top and the left, I use those elements here because the fixed position, it acts like the absolute in terms of position. So we need to use those properties to put it here. And I use the display flex, the justify content center, and the same for the align item center. So you can be able to center this model sheet container. So I'm going to put this on to show you how things are working, how things are in the DOM. So here is our rectangle. And as we saw here in our body, this is the model sheet container. So the first element we have the line, and the second element we have the model sheet content. And also here I use those, the width and the height, and I use the percentage properties to adapt with the size of the window. And also I made the justify content center so I can be able to center the elements horizontally within this container. And finally, the line, this is its properties. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to start working on the content within this model sheet. And I'm gonna explain each thing that I did. So this is our final design of our model sheet. So I choose this design. You can choose wherever you want, depending on your preferences and your needs. Uh, I choose this element because it is widely used in most apps, and you can find it in pretty much app that you use. So when you want to delete an item, for example, you have that kind of screen or kind of model pops up on your screen. So let's jump into our code again, and I'm going to explain anything or each thing that I added here. And I'm going to start with the model sheet content that has the whole elements here. And next to it, we have the delete item, which is this line, this div, and we have the model sheet message class name that has this message. And finally, we have those two buttons inside the model sheet buttons. So I put them inside here so I can be able to center them and use the display flex and other things that I'm going to show you in the CSS file. But first, I did an adjustment here and I made the width fixed as 60, 150 pixel because to be honest with you, when I widen the browser, the model sheet looks not good. So that's why I made it fixed like this. And in order to center it like this inside the body, I did all those properties as 0 and the margin as auto to be able to be centered inside the body. And I'm gonna go straight into the model sheet content. I'm gonna explain the things that I did here to make it look like this. So the text align is centered to center those elements, the display is flex, and the justify content as center to center those elements horizontally. And of course, we have to use the flex direction as colon to put each element at the top of each other. And finally, the gap is 18 pixels. You have a little bit of gap between each element, and the margin, I used a top margin, so you can push it down a little bit. And this is for this header, and this is for this message, so it's very simple. And finally, the model sheet buttons, this is the shared, or this is the element that incorporates the two buttons here. I did those properties to have this design or to have them at the top of each other. And here, as you can see, I'm using the colon as flex direction because I'm using the display because initially when you do the display as flex, the elements are next to each other. And in order to make them at the top of each other, you have to use the colon as flex direction. And of course, we had to use the 25 pixel as a gap to have this little gap between those two buttons. And finally, we have this shared property between the two elements here. And here to have those differences of colors of the two buttons, we have to dissociate them like this. So that's pretty much our design here. And as I said, you can choose whatever design that you want. You don't have to do this. But the most important thing here is how you can be able to create the logic when, for example, I click here and I swipe down, it goes off the screen. Of course, the button is going to be seen and we are going to click on it again to pop up again. But also I'm going to add this soft layer behind the model sheet, this soft black layer that also we are going to add. Another thing that I'm going to add is when I click here, for example, outside the box, it's going to automatically shuts down. So that's what we are going to create in the next step. I'm going to do the whole coding and I'm going to explain each thing that I did. So here I added this soft black layer, as you can see, underneath the model sheet, and also what I added here. So I'm going to open up the console log, and as you can see, when I click outside the box, we get this message click. And if I click here, we don't get anything. So let's explain those things before we move on to the swipe up and down logic. And I'm going to show you how I did those two things. So the first thing that I added, I created a new div wrapped around the whole elements so I can be able to add this div, which is the soft black layer. That's its class name. So I'm going to go over to the CSS file to show you what I did to make it fully screened, and this is our properties. Of course, the width and the height is going to be 100%, and I used here the fixed position again because, as we said, that the element that has the fixed position is going to be at the top of all the elements. So we did this. So once we do this, it's going to be at the top of the box. So in order to make it beneath of it, so we use the z index -1. Of course, the black layer is going to be the black color is going to be black, and the top and the left we made it 0, and the opacity is going to be 0.3 to make it soft and opaque like this. So let's move on right now to the logic of handling the outside click. So the first thing that we did, we used the useRef hook and we assigned it to this constant, and this constant is right here. So what we're doing, we're accessing to the element inside the DOM, and this is the logic that's handling the outside click function. So what that means, we are using the use effect, and when the element is loaded up first, we are going to run those lines. And what are those lines? So I'm going to start with this. And this means that once it is loaded, we are going to add the click event listener to the whole element, to the whole document. And this line means that when we are exiting the component or the loading of the component, we are going to remove the click event listener. And this function, it's going to be triggered whenever I click, for example, in any element inside the document. And this is the part that is handling the outside or verifying whether we clicked outside or inside the box. So if we click outside of the box, we are going to get the click message because of this line. So once this line is true, we are going to get the click message. Otherwise, we are not get anything. So that's pretty much for our logic. The only and the last thing that I'm going to create is the swipe up and down logic. And also I need to create variable state to handle the opening and the closing of the box. So here we have our opening and closing logic of this box. As you can see, when I click on the button, we have this little animation and the box goes from the bottom to the top. And when I click outside of it, it closes down. So I'm going to explain this. So first we added this variable state, and next we created the handle open modal sheet linked to the button here with the on-click event listener. So when we click on this button, this will get triggered, and this event dot stop propagation means that the click event listener that we're adding here when this model sheet is loaded, because it's going to be added to the whole document, including this button. And in order to preserve its click event listener, its own event click event listener, we have to use the stop propagation. Otherwise, if we don't do this, when we click on the button, nothing's going to work. And here we have the changing of the state variable of the open model sheet. When it is false, it's going to turn to true, and vice versa. And those variables, we're adding them as arguments inside the model sheet. So you'll be able to rely on to whether to show the model or not. And that's our basic logic to do this. So we are using the turning operator inside the class name. So if it is true, we are going to add the visible class name. Otherwise, nothing's going to be added. And the same thing we did for the soft black layer. So I'm going to show you what I did inside the CSS file. I made some adjustments here to make this logic working. So the first thing, I hided the model sheet by doing this. And once this model open model sheet variable is true, we are going to add the visible, and then the bottom is going to be 0 pixel. And the same for the soft black layer at the bottom. As you can see, the visibility is hidden. So once the visible class name is added, the visibility is going to be visible. So this is how our project is working so far. The last logic that I'm going to add is the swiping logic. So for example, when I swipe like this and it reaches a threshold, it's going to be closed automatically. So let's work on this. So this is our final version of our code, and I'm going to show you how things are working so far. And as you can see here, when I drag it down like this, it is closed. And also I want to show you something. When I drag it a little bit like this, it goes back to its initial positioning. But also when I'm clicking cancel, it closes up. So I'm gonna show you what I did and how I made this work. So we are gonna start first by those three variables. So I'm gonna explain each one. So the start y variable, it's the initial start, or it's the initial click. So when we are clicking, for example, here, that's what gets updated. And the translate y, we are going to use it to move the actual box. And the is mouse down is a variable that we are going to rely on to know whether we clicked or not. And secondly, I added those event listeners here. We are going to use the on mouse down, on mouse move, and finally on mouse up. So the on mouse down, it's going to be triggered when I first click on the box. So we are setting the is mouse down to true, and we are getting the position of the mouse when we click. So this is getting the is mouse down to true, and we are getting the position of the clicked mouse initially, and we are setting it to the start Y. So now we are going to move the hand to the handle on mouse move function, and we are doing this verification because actually this is going to run once you hover the box. So we have to do this verification. Only we are going to do this calculation if the is mouse down is clicked, or if we clicked initially on the box. And here we are doing the simple calculation, the difference between the initial position or the initial click position and the move of the mouse. And here we are setting this verification only if the delta y is positive, because when we move like this, it's going to be positive, and when we move it up like this, it's going to be negative. So in order to avoid to go upwards, we are checking this condition, and only we are going to change this translate y, which we are going to use here in the style of the whole element to be able to move it. So only we are going to do so only if it is positive. And next, we are going to move to the handle on mouse up. And this is a strict where when we stop clicking or we release the button. So eventually, we are going to set is mouse down to false and the start Y to 0 as we begin when the component was loaded. And here is the interesting part. So we set this to create kind of a threshold, and the threshold that we set is 2070 pixel. So if it is lower than this pixel, it's going to go back to its initial positioning. But if it is above it, it's going to be closed down. And finally, I added this on-click event listener inside the cancel button. So when we click on the button, it's going to be, or the variable is going to be false. The open model sheet is going to be false. So we've come to the end of this video. I want to thank you for watching it, and also make sure to hit the notification button and also leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think about my work and what are your suggestions to be able to improve my work. And probably I did some mistakes. You can point them out there. So thank you again for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.